are you, a specialist corporal? What are you?
I'm a lieutenant.
Lieutenant, get out of the car. Take your seatbelt off and get out of the car.
Stop line 3. No killing me. Stop line 3. No killing me.
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to The Struggle. We start with police body cam footage. Two officers who spotted the terrible crime of a man driving a new car. Or perhaps it was a man driving a new car while black. It took place in Windsor, Virginia, December 5th of last year, but it's only coming to light now because of a lawsuit. Two police officers on a dark road noticed the car and turned on the siren. The driver of the new car, Second Lieutenant Caron Nazario, was afraid of getting out of a car on a dark road, and so he slowly drove the car a mile to a well-lit gas station. There he asked what was going on. Police angrily told him to both put his hands outside the car driver window and to get out of the car. When he kept insisting about knowing what was happening, he was sprayed with a chemical, with pepper spray. He was finally gotten out of the car. He continued to ask what was going on. He was forced down to the ground.
What are you, a specialist corporal? What are you?
I'm a lieutenant.
Lieutenant, get out of the car. Take your seatbelt off and get out of the car. You made this way more difficult than it had to be if you just complied. Get out of the car.
I'm reaching for my seatbelt.
Fine. Take your seatbelt off and get out of the car. Straight onto the ground. Straight onto the ground.
Ma'am. Is your commanding officer available?
Down. Let's go.
Is your commanding
Let's
officer
go.
available?
Get on the ground. Get on the
Can
ground.
you please talk to
Get
me
on the
about
ground
what's
now.
going on?
Get on the ground or you're getting sprayed again. Get on the ground.
Can you please talk to me about what's
Get on
going
the ground.
on?
Get on the ground now.
Can you please talk to me about what's going on? Can you please talk to me about what's going on? Yes, sir. Can you please talk to me about what's going on? Why am I being treated like this? Why?
Because you're not cooperating. Get on the ground.
Why am I being treated like this? This is really messed up. This is really messed up.
Sir, well, just work with me.
This is fucked up. This is fucked up. This is fucked up. This is fucked up. This is fucked up.
Remarkably, the Army lieutenant was not killed. His car was searched without a warrant, and then he was let go after being warned to keep quiet. Luckily, the very strange but not unusual occurrence of police cameras suddenly not working didn't happen this time. The video went viral, and the lead police officer was fired. Supposedly, the cops didn't see the temporary tags on the car. Okay, but why, after they stopped him, did they have to pull out guns? Why are they always pulling out guns? Nazario is suing for $1 million. We hope he gets $2 million. And by the way, Windsor, Virginia, which is about 100 miles south of Washington, D.C., gets $120,000 a year from traffic stops. From this week's headlines, you see that the plague of police attacks on minorities continues. There'll be a demonstration this Sunday, April 18th, in New Haven at 3 o'clock. And we spoke to one of the rally organizers, Justin Farmer. I'll be speaking with Justin Farmer. He's an activist and an elected official. He's on the City Council of Hamden, Connecticut, and on the steering committee of Central Connecticut DSA. And we're going to talk about an upcoming rally.
We are now having a rally for all victims of police violence. And the distinction in that is that, a couple of weeks ago, some of us got together, some undergrads from Yale, other community members, um, and tomorrow marks 2 years since the shooting of Stephanie and Paul here in Hamden, but more specifically, crossing from Hamden into the New Haven borderline. And then 3 days from Friday marks the shooting in Wethersfield of Anthony Chulo Vega. And I think for a lot of us, we wanted to remember those who've been harmed by police violence, but also the ones that we've lost, right? And this is a season of sadness, right? Because we go from here into next month being the fatality of Jason Negron, and 2 days before it was the death 22 years ago now of Malik Jones. So for many communities across the country, it is a time of mourning, but more specifically in Connecticut, this happens to be that time where something about the weather warming up makes certain people uncomfortable around people of color, and our police are unequipped to deal with our communities and ends and fatalities.
All right, so let's get to the basics. What time is the rally on Sunday?
So yeah, the rally is Sunday at 3 p.m. We're going to be at City Hall. And we're going to invite many of the community groups and organizations to speak their mind and share their perspectives. Some families of police violence will be there and share their thoughts. But really, it's a time to, again, before the recent shooting in Minneapolis, it was just us coming together and saying, hey, we need to think about it. I think now it's more demanding more of our leaders, right? We cannot keep having this go on. We need to figure out uh, public safety and policing are not synonymous. We know that. That's been proven at this point. So the question is putting it to our local leaders. What will you do to see a change, right? What policies will you craft to change how things work? How will you reflect those decisions and changes in your budgets as it's budget season for most municipalities in the state? And more importantly, where do you stand on these issues, right? I feel like a lot of elected officials, including myself in some respects, are quiet on what defunding the police means, on what abolition means, on what police reform means, what equity means. And I think we need to push ourselves to define these things.
Now, are there speakers that you know of beforehand, or is that still being worked out? What about groups that are sponsoring this?
So, I know Black Lives Matter in New Haven has shared this out. I know Justice Ramumbi is going to be there. I know hopefully a family member of Chulo will be coming. But in speaker lists, we're growing every day and figuring it out as, the recent shooting has changed a lot of stuff where I think part of these rallies and demonstrations, right, need to be a space for people to share their feelings, to get out their frustrations, right, in a productive way. I also think it's important that, I'm doing this in collaboration with DSA, right? And our critique is a leftist critique, and we know that capitalism is the reason behind so many of these atrocities, and that it is the unjust power dynamics that perpetuate structural institutional racism. So there will be some members from DSA speaking, but Sunrise people will be there. So lots of different groups from all different perspectives talking about how police violence affects them.
I'm glad you mentioned Justice for Mubi. For those who don't know, we've covered this a lot on our show, but Justice for Mubarak Solomon refers to the young man who was killed by 7 bullets from a state trooper January 2020. And there hasn't even been a decision from the state prosecutor on whether to indict anybody, not even a decision. And the Derek Chauvin trial looks like it's almost over. It's extraordinary. So that's really good that you're going to be bringing that up. Last question. So you mentioned the slogan, defund the police. So where do you stand on that? What do you think of that slogan?
Yeah, I think yes, right? Defund the police, yes. But I'm coming from the critique of abolitionists. I believe in abolition of police, right? So I'd go a step further. Defunding the police means that you are going to divest from the policing institution and reinvest in things that make sense, and reinvest in what your priorities are, right? Dr. King said budgets are moral documents, right? So if we can agree that policing as an institution is not working, then we should not continue to put money into it. We should figure out what the issues are and divest from that and put it into the solutions. We hear from police departments all across the country. People want us to be social workers. They want us to be teachers. They want us to be mentors. And you hear the police lament that that's not their job. I agree with them. Great. It's not your job. We shouldn't be giving you the money to do it if it's not your job. Some people are worried and concerned about that. But when we have our police being trained in paramilitary exercises, when we have military grade weapons in our community to deal with trivial small pursuits, things like disorderly conduct that spiral out of control, that we end up having NRAPs, right? Tanks, right? Those are not things that that our police departments need. SWAT was developed to respond to the Black Panther Party. And why did the Black Panther Party germinate? It was because police kept killing people, right? So you had people doing police watches, video cameraing stuff, and then in some chapters, more prolific, they carried guns with them and watched the police while they were doing their jobs to make sure that they were being held accountable. Fast forward, right, 50, 60 some years, we are now seeing body cams, right? Instead of someone else following police and holding a camera, we're seeing police with the camera on them. And in the times that it's on or it hasn't malfunctioned, time and time again, we see misconduct, which shows us that police are not trained or equipped to deal with these jobs. And I think it's time for us to get back. If we're going to have policing, it needs to be doing investigatory work, crime prevention. The truest crime prevention is going to be jobs programs, right? It's going to be after school programs. It's going to be development of infrastructure like community centers. And if we're serious about public safety, we need to divorce it from this idea of policing, because public safety and policing are not synonymous. So I think defund the police is a great slogan, but I'd go a step further.
To see the full interview, go to thestrugglevideo.org. Now, on past programs, we've talked about the upcoming online panel organized by Jewish Voice for Peace New Haven about several courageous Palestinian and Jewish women. We talk with one of the organizers, Susan Bramhall, about the event. Tell us about the event Jewish Voice for Peace is planning for the virtual Women's and Gender Studies Conference?
The conference is at Southern Connecticut State University, and our chapter will introduce the audience to 6 women whose lives have been deeply affected by the Israeli military occupation of the West Bank, and they'll be speaking in their own words. And our goal is to highlight the spectrum of responses that the women have had to the challenges brought on by the occupation, and to encourage discussion of those responses. We're asking the audience to join us in exploring our own experiences with oppression, considering questions like, how might I have responded, and how am I affected or might unintentionally be perpetuating systems of oppression in my life. So that's the
gist.
the meat of it.
Okay, so before we forget, what's the day and the time that this will take place?
It's Saturday, April 24th, and it goes from 3:45 to 5 p.m.
Okay, so who are the women that you'll be highlighting, these 6 women, and why did you pick them?
So Ahed Tamimi, people may have heard of. She caused a big stir when she slapped a heavily armed IDF soldier, and she spent some time in jail as a result of that. Jana Jihad, who's her cousin, who's quite a bit younger, and decided at the age of 7 that she was going to be a journalist because journalists weren't doing a good job of covering the activities that were happening in her village of Balim. And she's, I think, 16 now and very articulate. We have Gil Hallel and Sachar Vardi, who are Israeli women. Gil talks about her experience of losing her humanity in the IDF. And that's really interesting because she thought that she could go into the Israeli Defense Force and be the kinder, gentler face of it and not be abusive. And she found she wasn't, that she was transformed by the IDF in a way she didn't like at all. And Sachar Vardi is a resistor to the Israeli Defense Force, and she's an activist working to stop the oppression that Israel is perpetuating, but also working broadly and internationally on all of the sort of interconnected movements. So she's got a very broad focus. And Bahia Amawi is a Palestinian-American speech pathologist whose career was affected by a Texas state law that required her to sign a contract prohibiting the boycott of Israeli products. And so each of them, we have a video clip, we have an introduction so people have a little bit of context so they don't have to already know what's happening in the West Bank or Palestine. And so we tell their stories and invite people to consider that.
And before we leave the subject of Palestine/Israel, this bit of good news: the BDS movement is hailing computer maker HP's decision to respond to pressure and to divest from apartheid Israel.
Stop line 3. No killing, please.
On a very windy day, activists walked to 4 New Haven banks whose parent corporations have loaned money to the Enbridge Corporation to build a pipeline to bring tar sands from Canada across native land in Minnesota, potentially ruining that land and certainly ruining the climate.
Stop line 3. No killing. Stop Line 3. No killing.
So I'm really glad to see everybody out here. My name is Melinda. I think most people know who I am. I just wanted to start with a land acknowledgement. This is the land of the Quinnipiac people, who are members of the Algonquin-speaking peoples of North America. They moved seasonally from the shores of Long Island Sound, where in the spring and summer they harvested seafood and grew the Three Sisters, corn, beans, and squash, and moved to the Meriden area for their winter camp, where they hunted various animals for sustenance. The Quinnipiac were decimated by European diseases in the mid-17th century, and today a small number of families live in the region while others migrated to Wisconsin. So that's our sad story of the contact with the indigenous from the settler colonialists. The Line 3 so-called replacement project is a new pipeline over a new route that would cover more than 1,000 miles from Hardisty, Alberta, where the tar sands are, to Superior, Wisconsin, transporting an average of 760,000 barrels of tar sands crude oil from Alberta each day, with a capacity of 844,000 barrels a day, which is more than the Keystone XL pipeline would have carried had it not been stopped by President Biden on his first day in office. Yay! So we want President Biden to stop this one as well. The cost overrun is $1 billion out of a projected 5, 6, 7, or 8 billion, depending on the source. But everybody agrees it's an overrun of $1 billion so far. Due to COVID protocols, winter construction, and regulatory delays, but also because people have been blocking the route. People have been, sitting down, doing incredibly creative, courageous, nonviolent civil disobedience and halting construction for various periods of time. Despite ongoing legal challenges from indigenous groups and youth interveners, construction on Line 3 continues. If built, Line 3 would release as much greenhouse gas pollution as 50 new coal-fired power plants. It would violate indigenous treaty rights and put the state's water, ecosystems, and communities at risk. Enbridge's Line 3 is financed by Wall Street. JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, and TD Bank are all major lenders to Enbridge. Bang on your pot there. These companies are complicit in the building of this heinous pipeline. Projects like Line 3 are also clearly linked to violence against and the trafficking of Native American women and girls due to the installation in rural areas of temporary housing facilities for mostly overwhelmingly male construction workers known as man camps. At least 2 cases of sexual assault around Line 3 construction have already been documented. Line 3 is being fiercely resisted on the ground. And what we're here to do today, and this is going on all around the country, and maybe the world, is calling on the banks that are funding Line 3 to stop funding it. And they can't, and also insurance companies who are insuring it, to stop insuring it because they can't build without insurance. So we have letters that we're going to deliver to the different banks as we go along, and we have some pots to bang on. I also have a really great chant, so if people are okay chanting through your masks, I think it's probably not unsafe. Well, I have to explain one other thing. The connection with Connecticut is that Enbridge, the same company that's building Line 3, is the one that built a pipeline right across our state. And we just call it the Enbridge pipeline because they named it another indigenous name, which is such an insult. We don't use that name. But it's funding, it's enabling more frack gas to be built and consumed in our state. And that's something we can't have if we're going to have any hope of reaching our climate goals. So I'm going to let...
So what's the chant?
So the chant is, stop Line 3, no killingly. How about that? So we'll use that as we're walking around. And Eluna, do you want to speak next?
Okay. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are supposedly what we are promised in this country as unalienable rights. I struggle to understand then why we do not accept as guaranteed under those promises a livable planet, freedom of movement, and the protection of sacred land where sacred food is grown, the protection of clean, fresh water, and equal opportunities for all communities. Why are the banks we visit today funding Enbridge in the construction of this pipeline and paying over $360,000 to Minnesota police for project security, leading to increases in arrests of Indigenous women peacefully protesting on their own land? Why are we protecting the pipelines from the people who are only asking for their most basic, supposedly guaranteed rights in this country? Why do we consider ourselves a nation of law and order when we write and sign treaties with Indigenous leadership, then criminally violate those treaties and criminalize protest to those treaty violations? The 1837 treaty with the Anishinaabe people states that the privilege of hunting, fishing, and gathering wild rice upon the lands, the rivers, and the lakes included in the territory ceded is guaranteed to the Anishinaabe people. This pipeline jeopardizes that freedom, threatening the land and water that are crucial to the survival of people we as settlers have entered into a lawful treaty with. It is unconstitutional, it is inhumane, and it is inhuman for us to believe that we do not need clean water or living lands to survive, as the Anishinaabe people know that we do. We cannot risk poisoning the headwaters of the Mississippi River for the survival of people living along that waterline from Minnesota way down to Houston. We cannot continue to make the poisonous decisions that have brought us here today, strip mining tar sands for crude oil extraction. We have now cleared tens of thousands of acres of elk and bear habitat, leaving once thriving land destroyed, dug up, pulverized, looking like a moonscape, and permanently dead. U.S. oil sands describe the end result of their actions on what was once forest and thick sagebrush as clean as beach sand. The wastewater and chemical solvents used in this process are dumped right onto the land, poisoning wildlife and cattle in the area. Arsenic and mercury make their way into water supply. Also, we can extract oil that we do not even need to continue our lives as usual, given the cheaper, cleaner technologies at hand. Producing 1 barrel of this oil releases 3 times more GHG pollution than conventional oil. We then intend to pump that oil unsafely through and within our precious water supply across the Canadian border, threatening all the time to irreversibly destroy our rivers and streams, as this very same company has done in the recent past. People living downstream from the tar sands must now drink bottled water and take short showers to avoid skin lesions. These are our choices. These are the promises we have made and voided to ourselves. These banks are using your money without your permission to invest in projects that threaten our friends in Minnesota and all of us sharing this planet, to fund more aggressive policing against Indigenous women, to destroy their homes and livelihoods, to flatten and kill the habitats of the wildlife we love in North America. I ask all of you today to apply whatever pressure you can to these banks unless they agree to respect our rights and preserve our future. Thank you.
Very nice.
Very nice. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Great. My name's Acadia. I'm part of Sunrise New Haven, and I'm just the messenger today, so I'm going to read a speech that was written by Ian Glassman, who's a high schooler in New Haven. So this is coming from them. Thank you to everyone who came out today to raise your voice in opposition to the Line 3 pipeline. We are gathered here today because there is a pipeline called Line 3, that threatens the lives of the Anishinaabe people and their land. We are gathered here today because we can organize, because we can make noise. We are gathered here today because we can come together and fight. How can we fight the climate crisis if we don't fight Line 3, a pipeline that violates the treaty with the Anishinaabe peoples and nations, a pipeline that devastates the watersheds that grow wild rice, a pipeline that carries fuels that heat our poles and raise our sea levels? We are gathered here today because we are fighting back. To our elected officials, this is not acceptable. Now is the time to stand with the Anishinaabe peoples and fight this inhumane encroachment on sacred land. Now is the time to fight the threats to our cherished environment. Now is the time. Thank you.
Nicely done.
350 Connecticut here that we've been fighting Killingly and Line 3 and KXL and all the fossil fuel projects for a long time, and it's great to have everybody here with us. And I hesitate to ask a corporate bank to do a moral thing because they're by definition amoral and don't care.
Amoral or immoral?
Amoral. They're not bad, they're not good, they're just about money, which I guess could be immoral. But my point is that fossil fuels are a bad investment. Not only because they're losing value year after year, and that there is tons of resistance to these pipelines, that you won't get funding renewable infrastructure. But because there are no jobs on a dead planet. Like, if they keep funding things like this, then their banks will fall apart because we won't have a society to hold them up. And if there's not people to put money in their banks, then they die with the rest of us. So I say to these banks, like, I don't care about your morality, I care about your actions. And your actions are putting money in bad investments that's going to lose money for you. So stop funding oil.
Stop line 3. No killingly. Stop line 3. No killingly.
The first bank the protesters went to was Toronto Dominion, better known as TD Bank. There they tried to give management a letter.
Sorry, Alan.
Trying to keep out the press, huh?
Yeah.
Do you have a letter? Yes. For the branch manager? Is the branch manager in?
Yes. I'll give it a letter. 1 minute. I'll give it a letter.
Okay. Is it she? He?
It's a she.
She. Is she able to come down and I could give it to her personally?
You want to give it to her personally?
If I prefer. We can't really wait too long, but if she's available.
All right. Well, first we got to get some people out just for COVID-19. You got.
Yeah. Okay. Back up, everybody. A little.
Then to Bank of America.
The bank has been closed since COVID, but our point still stands. Because everything that you see around you was built on the tears of indigenous people, on the sweat of enslaved people, and on the brutalization of black and brown people that continues to this day. So Bank of America, TD Bank, Webster Bank, they are all still involved in this.
And to Wells Fargo. Lastly, to Chase. Folks in Killingly in eastern Connecticut who are under threat of local and global pollution from a new fracked gas plant took time out to rally against Line 3. A last bit of climate news. Watchers of this program know that the governor of Connecticut and the legislature are doing nothing to stand in the way of a fracked gas plant being built in Killingly, or a modernization of a fracked gas plant in Middletown, Connecticut, that would send 800,000 tons more of CO2 into the air each year. Now the state government is poised for a sleight of hand trick. It seems that the governor has made an executive order, really a goal, because these orders can be changed at any time, an executive order that says that Connecticut's electrical generation will be fossil fuel free by 2040. Well, that is a worthy goal. But now there's a proposed law, Senate Bill 882, that says that the only electricity that will be covered is that used by Connecticut residents. Now, since Connecticut power companies already make more than is used within the states, companies could build one fossil fuel plant after another in Connecticut as long as the electricity is sent out of state. It's a bad trick on the public. Will the legislature put it over on us? And before we leave, notice of this May 8th RPM event. That's our program for today. Stay safe, folks, but stay active. This has been Stanley Heller for The Struggle.